I've been planning for a long time, and this is really the reason why I set up my channel, to go through and do a review of Syd Barrett's work. I've done a lot of videos with music or other items, and honestly, that was just to try and get a feel for how to make a video. My intent all along was eventually to put together something that is a review of Syd Barrett's work as an artist, as a poet, and as a musician, to try and figure out what it was all about. And I don't even know if that's possible, but I think it's important enough to try. So here's a few disclaimers. The first is that this isn't approved by Pink Floyd. I'm not affiliated with that band, and they're not affiliated with any of the opinions that I might express here. Early on, I'm going to just be doing a review of his work, and I'm going to have very limited opinions to relay to anyone anyway. But eventually, I'm sure there's going to be opinions relayed. So when that happens, just keep in mind, those are my opinions and mine alone. So that's the first disclaimer. The second disclaimer is that some of these videos I'm going to have to rate as adult. So I'm sorry for some people that, aren't able to log in or whatever to watch them. I think that's a little bit unfortunate. But there are certain things that I don't think are appropriate for kids to be listening to or discussing. And that's just my opinion. So those two topics are going to be drug use and drug abuse. This was the psychedelic 60s, when these songs were being made in the early 70s. And there is a lot of nuance in there that should be discussed. Now, not every nuance necessarily is specifically stating drug use, but the possibility that that could be happening is part of the discussion, and I don't really want to have to get into that if kids are listening. The other one is that this is the era of free love. So if there's something going on that deals with sexual relations between folks in his music, and in particular, a song like Arnold Lane, which is just absolutely loaded with those types of references. If I'm going to discuss those and feel comfortable, I'm gonna rate that video as an adult video. So if you're really enjoying these and you can't watch those, I apologize in advance, but I can't in good conscience, discuss those items freely, knowing that a young kid could be watching it. Now, I'm going to provide in the description links to previous videos that were made by people like Lie Likes Music, BR Science, Rock and Roll, True Stories, and Polyphonic. I'm not associated with them. They're not associated with me. But those videos discuss what I would consider to be the pop history of Syd Barrett. And a quick rundown of the pop history of Syd Barrett basically is that he put together the band together with Roger Waters, or at least he built up the fame of the band with his ideas, and Mr. Waters had kind of already started the band. And as they were breaking through, Syd started to kind of break up mentally. And for whatever reason, either he was predisposed to it due to some condition that was similar to his father, or a stress got to him, or it was drug abuse. Who knows? Maybe it's a combination of all those. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of interviews with Roger Waters and other guys that are discussing that. But the truth is, I think the only person that really knows exactly what happens is Mr. Barrett, and he hasn't really spoken on those topics. So I don't know that those are totally knowable things. But what is possible to know is there actual genius in his work? And there are certain things that I have read or seen or heard that make me believe in the nature of genius or inspiration. For me, one of the books I read was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. When I read that book, it had a profound impact on me. So did Clockwork Orange. It was an astounding piece of literature. If you're into rock and roll music and you listen to Pink Floyd, in particular an album like Dark Side of the Moon, and it doesn't hit you in some way that impacts you with a feeling that you can't entirely explain necessarily, I'm not sure that you're alive. That album is loaded with genius and inspiration. So, one of the things that I'm going to provide as a link in the description also is an article, I believe it's an article entitled Untangling the Octopus, and it's by some literature professor, I believe. And he goes in and he breaks down the song The Octopus, which is a song that is absolutely loaded with literature references. I'm doing that to show that there is quite a bit of, let's say, poetic history in Syd Barrett's work. And when you recognize it, and you recognize that you can find a string in his songs and pull on them and uncover more and more information and more, let's call it beauty, then you realize that he was tying together some really astounding things. And they're worth talking about. I don't know necessarily that someone like me or anyone else is ever really going to know another person, and certainly not Syd Barrett. But perhaps we can understand aspects of their work, and that's what I want to put together in this series. This is the introduction to that series, and I'm going to call it Peeling Syd Barrett. I don't know, that's what came to me tonight. And this is Christmas of 2020. So it seems appropriate. Let's see if we can tackle the octopus of Syd Barrett's work in his poetry, his music, and his art, get a better understanding of the man, and see if it's something that's worth talking about and considering and remembering him for. And if so, then maybe this will be a worthwhile docu-series. Another link that I want to provide is a link to an interview or a show that David Chappelle put together entitled Unforgiven, I believe. And the reason I'm including that is because in that discussion that he gives, he breaks down why he left the Chappelle show and threw away all that money. And I want to clarify now, I'm not saying that necessarily that's exactly the same thing that Syd Barrett did. What I'm saying is that, as Chappelle notes in that, if you watch it, he states that because he wasn't going along with what other people wanted or thought was appropriate, they started to call him crazy. And I can remember specifically thinking, wow, the guy's lost it. He's lost his mind. He's, gone crazy. He ran off somewhere. I think everyone was saying he ran off to South Africa and was out of his mind. But as you see him present the material and present an explanation, you realize he's not crazy at all. He actually had something of an idea of what he wanted and how he wanted to live his life, and he decided to do it that way. And other people, for some reason, felt that they had the right to call him crazy or tell him how he was supposed to be living his life. Again, I'm not saying that's what happened with Syd Barrett. For all I know, he may have actually suffered from something like schizophrenia. It's just funny to me how many people are willing to call someone else crazy that have no idea about the science of psychology and aren't even referencing reviews that are performed or analysis that are performed by actually certified psychologists. So, how do I want to put this series together? Well, what I want to do is With each one of the episodes, and I'm going to try and do at least one or two a week, I want to run through the context of the era or the context of work, or perhaps influences on music or life from that time. And that'll be a little bit more clear as I run through things. The second thing I want to do is take one particular song or one particular art piece and try to break it down to figure out what the influences are that are easily understandable, and then kind of discuss them. Again, Mr. Barrett was, as noted by his sister in numerous interviews, Rosemary, he considered himself to be an artist, and not just, I think, an average type of artist. He was almost like a synthetic abstract artist, which means that it's very difficult and perhaps impossible to totally understand what someone's relaying, if they're even trying to relay something. What's trying to be relayed is often a very subjective type of feeling or sensation. So in order to kind of illuminate this idea, I'll throw a story from, I believe it was a documentary on Jackson Pollock, and there was a critic who was discussing seeing one of his paintings for the first time, and it affected him so much that he just started crying. Now, if you've ever seen Pollock's work, it's just, to the average person, it's a mess. And I mean, I do some painting, but I don't really like his work. I don't totally get it. There are often, I don't know how to call it, graduations of time in an artist's career like him. And often with an artist's work, there are periods of work that I can look at and say, okay, that makes sense, I get that. But then they'll go somewhere and I just don't get it anymore. And for Pollock, a lot of his stuff is like that for me. But this critic was looking at it, and it affected him greatly, enough so to make him cry and feel some form of connection to what he felt was trying to be relayed on perhaps a human or a personal or a spiritual level. I don't know. So that is an aspect of abstract art, and we have to recognize that quite a bit of Mr. Barrett's work was fairly abstract. So if he's doing that with things like poetry and music, it may be deliberately obscure so that it's up to the person receiving that information to interpret it in a way that's personal for them. But let's run through and see if there are some basic things that perhaps we can understand. So the first item that I want to kind of point to, and this one hopefully will kind of illuminate for you the nature of Mr. Barrett and why he's someone that often inspires a little bit of inspiration, but also a kind of morbid curiosity in a lot of other people, is on full display in a song called Jug Band Blues. And I'm going to link it, and this is from the Pink Floyd official, I don't know what you call it, it's their group. So it's the video that's approved by them. And I'm not going to run through the lyrics to the song at this point. All I want you to do is take a look at the video and take note of him personally, what he's doing, and what's happening in the song. And come back and say, I don't know, I'm gonna put in a little bit of a break here, and then I'll discuss some of the things that I've noted, and we can move on. Okay, I'm assuming that you've watched Jug Band Blues, and there are a few things that I think are noteworthy. One of them is that there is an aspect to his demeanor that is apparently deliberately confrontational. It's flat emotion and a flat affect. And for a lot of people, that's very disconcerting. And I remember watching a psychological video about a mom and her baby. And it was showing how if the mom just kept a straight face, that it was very disconcerting to the baby. And she only did it for a little while because the baby very quickly, was getting upset. But there is a human aspect to, or a natural human response to seeing a flat affect in a person, which is it's going to unnerve you and it's going to get your attention. Now, that may be on purpose or it may not. We don't know if what he was doing was on purpose or not, but it certainly grabs your attention, doesn't it? The second thing I want to point to is the coloration, which most people, and if you didn't notice this, then I'll challenge you to go back and watch it again. Most people will think that the coloring or the lighting, the colored lighting of that video is random, but it is not. And if you are a painter, you will recognize that they're using contrasting colors like red and green to create a kind of unease like you would do in a painting, as Van Gogh did. And they're also using coloration to match certain lyrics. So when he talks about love in the winter, he's blue. And when he talks about dressed in red, there's red. There is something quite special happening in this song, and it's deliberate. And he asks the question in there, who's writing the song? So you have to wonder what exactly that is all about. Anyway, this is the first of what I hope is going to be, I don't know, quite a few. I want to do as thorough a job as I can on the music, on the poetry, and on the artistry, the artwork of Roger Syd Barrett. And I'm going to apologize in advance that I'm not using a lot of copyrighted material. I've tried to get in touch with I don't know how many people to utilize their material and cite them, and I have been ignored by almost all of them. So I'll do the best I can to talk around topics and still try to be coherent enough that this is enjoyable for, I'm going to say this isn't going to be enjoyable for most people that are just casual fans and like to have really pop videos made with exciting visuals and stuff. But perhaps this will be worthwhile to people that are actually very interested in the band and the influences of Syd Barrett in the band and the work that he created. That's all for now, and perhaps see you again soon.